And back again on the Pride of Detroit PODcast, and we got one more thing to talk about for our training camp preview. Technically two things, but it's the same topic, and it's about players who are on the roster who need to prove the most at training camp. We have it divided up between players at the top of the roster who need to prove the most and players at the bottom of the roster who need to prove the most. I think I want to start at the top just because I think there is this idea that even though you're at the top of the roster, we know who you are, known commodity, this, that, and the other thing. I don't know about that so much. Sometimes you do need to see stuff out of guys in training camp, especially if we're trying to take a full picture of what the season is coming up here. We have a few names to go off of. I know we're not going to have him for another 6 games, Jeremy, but I feel like Jameson Williams is one of those names that just sticks out right away. We were talking a little bit about him during a break about the camp, and I think the vibes around him are good. I think there's a good plan in place for him, and we'll let Morgan kind of elucidate on that because I know he was at the training camp as well, and you Jeremy have talked with his trainer. But we're going on a while. We're going to have a while before we actually see Jameson Williams and what he can do on the field. And what we saw last year was very limited, and it's caused some concern in certain circles. I think that's a little premature, but I also can understand where the concern is coming from at the same time. And I don't think no amount of Kool-Aid should completely dampen that. There is still plenty for JMO to do. And while he's serving his suspension, he can still, do some stuff at training camp as well for us.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is his first real opportunity to get some sort of rapport with Jared Goff, right? Like, he got some of that during the season. Obviously, they practiced during the season when he came off the NFI and all that. But this is huge for him. This is his first training camp to go through. This is his first opportunity. And I think one of the interesting things about this training camp is I'm curious as how the Lions are going to use him. Are they going to use this opportunity for 6 weeks? Let's get you in rhythm with Jared Goff, or are you kind of focusing more on like, no, we need to be ready to be without him, and let's run Jameson with the twos so that we're ready. We have Marvin Jones ready, we have Khalif Raymond ready, we have Josh Reynolds and all those guys ready for the roles that they're going to play in the first month and a half of the season. It's an interesting balance, and I'm sure it'll be a little bit of both. It's not going to be only first team and only second team with JMO, but like he's got a lot on his shoulders already for being a first round draft pick, but now it's also about how he responds to the first real adversity of his NFL career. How is he going to respond to a bunch of critics who are, every single drop pass that someone, that there's a person at training camp that watches, like, how is he going to respond to that? Every moment that something doesn't go right, that he's, the passes behind him, or he's making a wrong cut, all that sort of thing, or everything's under a microscope with this kid now. And so that's its own challenge rather than just being a good football player. It's being under the microscope. It's handling a ton of adversity this young in his career. It's a lot to take on. And so a lot of that, no matter what he does over the next 6 weeks, nothing is going to, like, it's not going to be like, well, I guess he was a bust, or yep, well, I guess he was a real deal. He has to prove that once we're talking real football games, but he starts the narrative really for the first time this week. Like, this is when he gets his first opportunity to be like, no, this is what I'm about, not everything else that everyone else is talking about.
I think it changes how much fans have patience for him. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and like, he's going to have to get off to a hot start, but like, we're also going to have to remember that this is really his rookie year, if we're going to, like, you know what I mean? Like, and even this training camp's going to be a little off for him because he's not going to be getting all the first team reps, I think, as he, would if he were not suspended for the first 6 weeks of the season. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he responds to not getting 100% of the first team snap share in practice. We'll see what their thought process is with that. I think Jeremy made a great point. Like, I don't know. You also factor in like Marvin Jones and like Josh Reynolds are pros. Like, maybe they don't need as many snaps to get in rhythm with Goff, but we'll see. It's going to be interesting.
I also don't think Marvin Jones has fallen off as much as people wanted him to. Like, I took look at a lot of his snap counts, and like he lost a lot of his time last year with the Jaguars to newer weapons they were bringing in, but it was mostly because they just stopped using him in the slot. Like Marvin Jones, I don't know. Like it's hard to keep doing this in your 30s, but he was still producing at a high level last year as well. So I think that's, yeah, to your point, I just don't think this is clear cut for that. Jeremy, I wanted to ask about the linebackers. We kind of touched on as we were going through the amount of pressure that's on rookies. And indeed, Jack Campbell is the one at the top of the roster who I think needs to prove the most in this training camp right now, green dot or not.
Yeah. I mean, listen, he, of all the Lions draft picks, especially the early ones, he's the one that I still have the most questions about. Because like you said, there's a lot of pressure on this guy to be the dude, the guy, the center of your defense, the main communicator, and guy who's never going to leave the field, right? Like on defense, you don't have a ton of guys like that are going to be 100% of the snap guys. And Jack Campbell might not be that guy right away, but training camp is really the first opportunity a linebacker has to flash, right? Like we saw it right away with Malcolm Rodriguez last year. We knew, like, oh, that's why they drafted that guy. Oh, that's why they've been talking this guy up as a guy that could legitimately start. We saw it right away. And so I'm hoping we see at least that much flash from Jack Campbell, because like pads are on now, dude. Like now you can start hitting people. Now you can start shedding tackles. Now you can start dropping into coverage and popping dudes that cross over the middle of the field. I'm not saying I need to see that right away, but I at least need to see the flashes of it right away. It doesn't need to be consistent. It won't be consistent. He's a rookie taking on a very serious role on this defense. That'll take time, but I need to see some of those flashes, some of those instincts, because I think some of that, there are some questions about his game. There are some questions about whether he can truly be the sideline-to-sideline guy at 250, even though, you know, he answered some of those questions at the Combine. I think seeing it on the field in play is a whole different thing. And, yeah, I think this is a big – and considering all the talking up that they've done with Derek Barnes and the fact that he was repping with the first teams in OTAs – there's legitimacy to the fact that they think if Jack Campbell isn't ready, they're not going to start him. And that, again, it's fine. It's not a big deal, but let me at least see the flashes. You're the 18th overall pick. You're the only linebacker in this class that was taken in the first or second round. Show me why.
I think a lot of the like Campbell detractors in the draft process and even after the Lions selected him was he doesn't really show on tape the way he tested physically. So if he can start, you know, flashing a little bit more like, oh, okay, you're that freaky, like what is it, like 9th out of like over 2,600 linebackers, according to Kent Lee Platty's RAS score. So show us that a little bit more, flash, you know, start at the mic. And I think he'll you know, maintain like what his expectations, because I do think he's going to be a nice player. Is another sneaky one. I was thinking about this, Jeremy, Chris, Aleem McNeil.
Yeah.
Just because you like, it's either like this year, I feel like there are other parts around him, right? Like this is the year he's either gonna take the next step and like be a consistent like dude, or if he's just going to be, you know, a guy that's sometimes a dude once in a while. You know,
it's hard because I just don't feel like because on one hand, I don't associate him at the top of the roster just because no one from defensive tackle has really been standing out from that pack, but that just puts the pressure on a defensive tackle like McNeil to stand out. I just don't know if he's the one who can, like, I guess I'm not discounting the possibility he might get lapped by some other guy right now. Like it would be outside the realm of possibility, but I'm not going to put it at a 0% chance. He's not proven himself to be the bona fide defensive tackle number one on the roster right now.
But I think that's what he needs to prove, right? Like this is year 2 of this is the breakout season for Aleem. Like it didn't happen last year. It happened a little bit towards the end of the season. And listen, I think what's on Aleem this year is for him to live up to all the hype that I'm guilty of doing. Some of the media is guilty of doing. It's, you know, he's changed mentally since the defensive meeting at the middle of last season. He's changed physically. He's gone out and made himself leaner. We're seeing the pictures of him punching bags during the offseason, and he looks stronger. He looks faster. He looks all that sort of stuff. None of that means jack squat if you can't do it on the field. And Chris, we go through this every year, the best shape in your life guy. Like that is the Aleem McNeil story. He is that guy this year. So prove that it's real. Prove that you can make a jump and get yourself into the conversation of guys like Dexter Lawrence and Quinn Williams and Ed Oliver. He's not there yet, And maybe his ceiling
I don't
isn't
think
even
I don't
that
think
guy.
he's good. That's not his ceiling.
Maybe it is, maybe it
Unfortunately.
isn't. But I think there's a sub portion of fans that think like he could make that jump. And I'm gonna work on a piece maybe this week, maybe next week, detailing like year 3 is about the time when some of these guys did it. Some did it right away. Like your Aaron Donalds, you knew year 1 this dude is a monster. Some it took until about year 2, year 3, some even year 4 to make that breakout season. And so he's got an opportunity if this is it. And maybe this, and like you said, like the fact that is not a deep defensive tackle room, it's now on Aleem to prove that there's a reason why they didn't have to invest that highly in that room. He's the reason. And you never want to put all your eggs in one dude's basket like that. But at the same time, I think this coaching staff has very high hopes for Aleem. And maybe it isn't Dexter Lawrence and the like, but it's a small step down, I think, in terms of expectations for him. So I think that's a really good pick, Morgan.
I think Jeremy makes an excellent point too. Just I was like going to say the coaching staff definitely thinks like he has the potential and the likelihood to be that kind of guy because, yeah.
I think moving to the bottom of the roster, there's a lot of names down here, and maybe like we touched a little on the wide receivers. If I gave you 3 names between Kennedy, Benson, and Green, which one has to prove the most of those 3, Jeremy?
I mean, they're fighting for the same spot, so it's almost
No,
like
I know
they have to prove the exact same amount. I don't know. Like, I guess maybe the pressure isn't as much on Antoine Green because it's his first year.
Yeah, he'll be able to go back to the practice squad. Same, I think, with like Tom Kennedy if they don't make it. Although, at this point in his career, it's getting a little up there for Tom Kennedy to stop bouncing between that and the practice squad.
Sure. Like, I guess, like, Trinity Benton, I guess, but here's my expectations are so low for Trinity Benton that I don't know how much he can do to prove me wrong. I mean, maybe he has it in him. Maybe it took him all this time to get healthy and get right, and now he's going to prove why the 7th round trade for him 2 years ago was worth it. But I just have so little expectation for Trinity Benton. I'm just like, who's next? Give me someone else.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the guy I've got the lowest expectations for, and yet I really want to see what he can do in camp, is Logan Stenberg. I'm not sure what to do at this point, and I feel like every time I've watched Logan, my stock on him just keeps dropping and dropping and dropping, and the Lions have opened up that guard room quite a bit. Coyote Owosika, I think, is probably competing for that same stratosphere with him. But the rest of the guard, what's that?
That guard room's tough. It's tough to crack now. Like you have,
like you got Glasgow, you got Sorsdale,
right,
who they've invested draft capital into. They brought in Pierce Bacher and Cecil. Like top to bottom, I just don't know where Stenberg sits unless he can show why he's about as valuable as someone like Sorsdale.
Yeah, I mean they've tried this dude at center and it hasn't worked. They've tried him at guard. He was just short of a disaster when he had to play last year, and so. Definitely a guy where it seems like last chance, dude. We're still going to try to get you at center. And like, listen, if he can show up as a center, maybe that's the spot for him. Maybe he proves himself as a guard center rotational guy, and that would put him over a guy like Brad Cecil, would put him over a guy like Ross Pierschbacher. It would put him side by side with a guy like Graham Glasgow, who, if he's 30, he's on a 1-year deal. If Logan can somehow get to anywhere close to Graham, maybe you can be like, all right, let's keep him for this year, and he'll be that backup center guard rotational guy next year. I mean, the problem is I haven't seen anything close to where
we've seen many years of Stenberg and just nothing to really show for it.
Yeah.
Comes from that Kentucky offense, man, where they just lean on people and bully people. I just feel like that guard, that game, I forget when it was when he started at guard, but it was scary. I remember watching, I was like, oh my God, get him out of there. And thank God Hank Fraley was like, we got to make a change, buddy. Not to be disrespectful, but good Lord. Yeah, that was bad. I think might be cooked just because of the offensive line depth. Like offensive line depth in the NFL is tough to come by, and the Lions actually have it right now. Like, some teams would be really happy with having a Matt Nelson on their roster, to be honest with you. Some teams don't have 2 good tackles, let alone 2 good tackles and a decent swing tackle. So Another one that might be in trouble, not in trouble, but like maybe closer than I don't know, than the staff and want to admit, but like Fatu Melifonwu, I think he's going to be, it's not a shoe-in this year as it has like it's been years past.
Yeah, the safety position is a weird one because it's not a ton of depth if you're just talking pure safeties, right? It's Tracy Walker, it's Kirby Joseph, then it's Iffy, Brady Breeze, and Brandon Joseph, and that's it.
Yep.
But you also kind of have to have guys like CJ Gardner-Johnson and Brian Branch be part of that conversation. And when you start stacking them up, then you're like, okay, like maybe Iffy isn't guaranteed, and you want to like let the guy have a shot, right? He transferred to safety last year, had to deal with a lot of injuries, had to deal with learning the position. Now he's had a full off season to learn it. Now he feels a little bit more confident and he's healthy. Maybe he can be that solid backup. Maybe he can push for something more, because I think another guy sticking with the safety position with a lot of pressure on him, and he's at the top of the depth chart, is Tracy Walker. Because listen, like, he's a guy that I think we all know is a talented football player, but has he put it all together in one season yet? I don't think he has. And listen, he's coming up on next year is the last year on his deal, and he's costing a heck of a lot of money. He's going to have to prove his keep here. He's obviously not going to get cut this year, but the man has to show up, and it's a tough situation to put him in, because he's coming off an Achilles injury. We talked about it in the second segment. Like, this is a guy who might not be fully ready in week 1 of training camp, and to expect a guy coming off a serious injury like that to hit the ground running and look like he's playing at 100% of his potential in the first year off that serious injury is like, that doesn't happen with a lot of players. I would say a wide majority of people don't look like themselves in that first year. Yet this is a very pivotal year for him, and you're not going to make or break your season in training camp, but you sure hope that you're going to see some of the things that this coaching staff saw in Tracy Walker enough to give him that big contract and call him the future of this secondary. So I think he's a guy with a lot of pressure with him. I think Iffy is right there too.
One last one from me, and I don't know where I'm really with him right now, but Julian Okwara, this is year 4. We haven't had a full season, healthy season from him. Most snaps he played defensively was in week 2 last year against the Commanders. It's and missed the back half, the back quarter of the season. I don't know what to do with him, especially that it seems like every year with the Detroit Lions, the edge rusher rooms gets more and more and more crowded, especially at defensive end. It's hard to see how he's going to stand out as guys like even someone like James Houston proves himself last year, or Pascal. Certainly like down the depth as it goes. You talk about the guard. I mean, you talk about the offensive line position being deep. That edge position just becomes more and more deep with each passing year. And I look and I'm like, I don't see the room I can make for him on this roster right now. I don't. And I don't know what to really do with it, especially with a guy who is just, again, has yet to play a single healthy season and is a unrestricted free agent next year, coming off of a rookie contract that just feels like, unless he really puts it together this year, might be one of his only big contracts he gets.
Yeah, similar to Iffy, Julian Okwara just needs to stay healthy, particularly through training camp, right? Like, they got to stay healthy. They both miss a lot of time, and they're both in too like hot of a battle to miss a bunch of time during training camp. So, like, the worst thing for Julian last year was James Houston going crazy, really, like, because that was Julian's like stand up, beat a tackle off the edge on an obvious passing downs, and now it's like, can you play in space a little bit more, Julian? Can you do a little of this? Can you do a little of that? Can you play special teams? So, yeah, definitely.
And we were doing our roster rankings. I knew Julian would be like low down on the list for our full rankings. I just wasn't expecting him to be as low as it is. And like, even someone like, say, Pascal or even John Kaminsky, way higher up than we would have a guy like Julian Okwara right now. It just doesn't bode well for him.
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's no question that he's edge 7 right now, behind Aiden, Kaminsky, Romeo, Charles Harris, James Houston, Josh Pascal. All those guys are, I would say, solidly ahead of him. And I think Morgan nailed it. Like, when you drafted Julian Okwara, the whole thing was, this guy can pass rush. It's going to take a while for him to develop into a full edge guy. Well, now that is James Houston. That is that Sam linebacker role. And guess what?
Yeah.
He actually proved it at the NFL level. We never got it out of Julian. We never saw the pass rush potential that we were like, oh, well, he has that. Let's wait and see him develop his full game, be a better run defender, drop in coverage. Like, I think Julian is maybe a little bit more polished at that stuff now. Like, he probably is a better run defender than James Houston. He can probably drop into coverage a little bit better. But at the same time, James Houston was a linebacker at Florida. Like, he knows how to do that stuff too. And so
he's flexible.
Is there even a scenario at all where you would rather have Julian Okwara out there than James Houston? No.
I mean, even looking at someone like John Kaminsky, like, what's the joke, Jeremy, that we never talked about John Kaminsky?
Right. We didn't.
Like there's so many other guys who have provided the production. I think we always sat around waiting for Julian Okwara to produce.
Right.
Julian has a lot of those things, like, maybe that he's better at than James Houston right now, but James Houston has something that Julian doesn't, and it's that little Von Miller ghost rush, skip to my Lou move he hits on tackles that just leaves them looking stupid.
And I'm sorry, that is more valuable than anything all day. Anything Julian can do.
All day, man, because it gets, why? Because it gets the offense off the field.
That's on third downs.
And here we go. Yeah, man. I can't wait I hope he's healthy all year this year, and Aaron and Glenn can get saucy with how he employs him, because, man, there was a clip on Twitter just recently, and it was like, blocking James Houston looks fun, and it was just a highlight reel of all his little ghost moves that he hit on tackles, and I was like, oh, this is just
this speaks poorly for Julian Okwara if we're having the conversation. It just immediately turns to James Houston is fun. Like, it's
yeah, see, exactly, it's tough out here.
Yeah,
and roster's better.
Last note, and let's make it quick to just wrap up here, but like, I've been trying to figure out the depth on running back, Jeremy. Like, I feel like the Lions like Jermar Jefferson, and I think we've talked about it before, that we don't think Craig Reynolds is a lock, and we think that they do like Jermar Jefferson. But man, I would hope he proves it in this training camp. I would hope they prove why they have this faith in him.
Yeah, third year, man. It's time to prove it. And yeah, you're right. Like, Dan Campbell even said last year, like, they wanted the opportunity to get Jermar into the lineup, and it just never happened. And listen, I like Craig Reynolds a lot. I think he's kind of the jack of all trades, master of none kind of player, where he can do a lot of things, include play special teams. But I think the Lions are looking for a little bit more juice from that RB3 role, because guess what? The running back position is a tough one. One of David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs is going to get injured at some point this season, and they're going to have to rely on that RB3 role to take a significant amount of carries. And so they want someone that can be dynamic. And Jermar Jefferson, I think, is a guy that is capable of that. He has some of the physical tools to do that. He just has to put it all together. And, having a new running backs coach in the room seems like it's kind of an interesting factor. You don't really know who that's going to play in favor of. Is it going to be him? Is it going to be Mohamed Ibrahim, who is a guy that was drafted under this new, or not drafted, but selected under this new running backs coach? Or is he going to fall in love with Jermar too? Or Greg Bell? Where does he fit in?
Yeah. I was going to bring up Ibrahim. Like, there's a good, I mean, UDFA aside, still a very good reason he could be RB3. No reason why he couldn't be, that he couldn't beat out Jermar and Craig Reynolds.
Yeah, it's going to be a battle. And I think we talk about the RB3 battle a lot, and some of it is overblown because you already know who RB1 and your RB2 is. But like I said, like, it's a high injury position. So whoever wins that job it's not like, okay, well, enjoy sitting on the bench and only doing special teams all season. No, they'll play some offense.
Yeah, you can pencil in your running back 3 to at least get like a handful of snaps probably every game. Like maybe Montgomery gets dinged up, or Gibbs is working in the slot a ton, and you just don't want to take him out of there because he's cooking whoever is guarding it. There's just so many things that could go on.
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
I completely agree.
The Lions are going to be up like 30 points in most fourth quarters, so why not get your RB3 some work?
Exactly. Okay. RB4.
Flip side of this conversation too, like, I didn't write him down just because I think Jermar Jefferson's more interesting, but I almost feel like I'm not completely closing the casket on Craig Reynolds, but I do feel like the chance for him to make the roster gets more and more slim by the day.
Well, I think the one thing working in his favor is that he has the most proof of concept. Like, he's gone out there for the last 2 years and done his thing. Like, he's been good. He hasn't been great. He hasn't been horrible. He's been good. The one thing that he doesn't have working in his favor is age. He's 27.
Sure. And I mean, you remember Hard Knocks. Like, there was a debate whether or not to release Craig Reynolds on Hard Knocks.
Yeah. I mean, Godwin Igwebuike is him last year. Like, we thought Godwin was pretty safe. He played great special teams. He was doing everything the right way. And it was kind of a surprising cut for him. And I think it was part of it is they wanted to get younger. Part of it is they, everything is so close when you come to RB3 too. So, it's anyone's game. And that's why we've been talking about it so much.
To me, man, like Craig Reynolds is fine. He's like a one cut, no nonsense runner.
Yep.
And this isn't meant as a slight, but like he's going to get you the Jamal Williams yards, like if the Lions elite offensive line blocks a play for 7 yards, he's going to get you 7.5 or 8, right? He's probably not going to be a game breaker, which is what we saw from Jamar. And I think that's why the coaching staff is a little higher on him, because he's got a little more wiggle, a little more juice and space, or at least he did pre-injury. So yeah, I'm right there with you.